Welcome back, Spurs fans, to another episode of the News4SA.com Spurs Roundtable, powered by Project Spurs. I am your host, Jeff Garcia, and with the regular season looming, we're going to look at what teams in the Western Conference could get in the way of the Spurs returning back to the NBA Finals. To talk about that, joining me is Quixem Ramirez, Q, as we like to call him. Q, welcome back, and you've been away for a while, haven't you?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome back, and let's talk about the threats in the West. The biggest threat has to be Oklahoma City.
Yeah, they're a team that is good on both sides of the ball. They're a great offensive team, and they're a great defensive team. The only problem with them is that they're kind of stagnant offensively. They tend to rely on Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant as isolation scorers primarily, and that hurts them because when the Spurs and smart defensive teams suck in on them, they're kind of like left with no options.
I'm glad you brought up Westbrook because he's in for his second surgery already. He had it already, and that's obviously the one from last season and now the preseason. He is out until the All-Star break at minimum. So he's out for quite a while. My thing with this Oklahoma City team is they rely too much on Durant and when Russell Westbrook's back in those two. I don't think that's going to be enough. They need more, and they lack that third option. They had it with Harden.
They did have it with Harden, and the thing about that team, they're going to be relying extensively on Jeremy Lamb and Reggie Jackson to, develop into reliable.
Really? I mean, you were going to talk about Lamb and.
I know it's a lot of convenience, but when Russell Westbrook and Durant play, they are a team that outscores their opponents by 10 points per 100 possessions. They are a team that, with just those two as the only focal points, regardless of what they have, they're going to be a threat, regardless of what surrounds them.
That's still not going to be enough, in my opinion, in a very heavily stacked. Yeah, I mean, you can throw the numbers at me, and it's great and all, but when you're looking at teams like the Spurs, Golden State Warriors, and whatnot, they need that third option. And I think right now they're hoping that will be Serge Ibaka. He's very great defensively. Spurs fans know about exactly what he can do on the defensive end, and maybe sometimes on the offensive end too when he has that jumper hitting.
And then they have faults. I mean, Serge Ibaka is a good defender, and he needs to develop his offensive game to help Durant out. But that being said, I still think that Oklahoma City is the co-favorites with San Antonio.
Without a big three of their own.
Without a big three of their own. That's just because Durant and Westbrook are that good offensively.
So if you're saying right now, if they're in a 7-game series with the Spurs, as the roster stand right now, you got Spurs winning that one or Oklahoma City giving them real big fits?
That's tough. I would say I have the Spurs winning, but with Westbrook healthy, in June, in May, in that time period of time, I might lean towards the Thunder. I'm not exactly sure. Things can change.
And I can see that because Westbrook is going to have practically almost close to half a season off. Yeah. Rehabbing, resting up, and everything. He's going to come back right when that.
And there's no telling how athletic he'll be when he comes out of that injury.
Right.
There's a lot of holes that they might have to patch up.
Just when I look at this Thunder team, they're great. Thunder, Russell Westbrook, Durant, but they don't have much of a low post scorer.
Do they need it? Do they need it? They have 2 top 10 offensive players.
Yeah, they're going to need it. In a conference that has Duncan, that has Blake Griffin, that has DeAndre Jordan, that has the manimal Kevin Fareed, I mean, you need some low post presence.
They were fine last year without that presence, and it's become to the point where NBA, you don't need that low post presence as much as you used to.
But they did get exposed. They did lose without Westbrook. How much Kevin Durant can? He's not Superman.
If they don't have Westbrook healthy in the playoffs, they're not going anywhere. If they have Westbrook and Jeremy Lamb does anything, or Reggie Jackson does anything,
or Ibaka to make that,
or Ibaka does anything, because they were all terrible in the against the Grizzlies. If they do anything offensively, just anything, they will be a team that could challenge the Spurs.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Grizzlies because Memphis is always one of those teams that Spurs fans are afraid of because of the size advantage that Memphis presents. So we're talking about Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol. In the offseason, they only added really Mike Miller. That's it. They're coming in basically with the same crew. Are they still going to be that Memphis team that gives Spurs fans, or maybe the Spurs a little scare, or are they still the Memphis Grizzlies and the Spurs can handle them?
Well, you can't discount them because they're a great defensive team. They lock down, and they have 2 low post presence that it's tough to stop. But the only problem I have with them is that they rely a lot on Mike Conley to generate offense in the pick and roll. And Mike Miller, he might just bust his ankles or something. He might just go down in a heap anytime during the season. And if that goes happen, then you can just close out on their best players, their 3 top, Zach Randolph, and then they're
the Spurs proved that they can handle the 2 big guys. Maybe not in a couple seasons ago, but last season, I mean.
And Thiago Splitter helped a bunch in that regard.
Yeah. And not to mention this time they have Jeff Ayers, who is another big guy that can,
Yeah, he can hold his own against those 2 guys.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about another team that is an up-and-coming team, and that's the Golden State Warriors. This Warriors team gave Spurs fits, Game 6, and they got offensive power. And Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, they lost Jarrett Jack, They lost Carl Landry, but they added a big name, Andre Iguodala.
And Iguodala is going to be their defensive fulcrum. He's going to be everything that they do around defense is going to revolve around Andre Iguodala in the perimeter and Andrew Bogut in the interior. And that's a good matchup for them. I mean, they have small ball capability. They can shoot the three. They're very versatile. The only problem I have is if Andrew Bogut goes down, which he has in the past, their team is suddenly terrible.
And they're bringing back, well, not to say they're bringing back, but a lot of their mainstays are going to be healthy. David Lee, mentioned Andrew Bogut, Stephen Curry in his questionable ankles. Those ankles got to hold up for an entire season. And of course, you were talking about Jared Jack. But the thing about this is that I wonder about Andre and Harrison Barnes coexisting. Can they split that role? Can they share that spotlight? Because Harrison Barnes is another young up-and-coming player, but Andre's established, and you know what you're going to get with Andre Iguodala. And
they need Andre Iguodala because their defensive perimeter backcourt is not going to hold up over the entire season.
But is Andre now enough to bump this Golden State Warriors up to a team where they're now a threat, a legitimate threat to the Spurs?
They're a legitimate threat. I personally have a lot of worries against them because I'm not sure if they can coexist, if Harrison Barnes would be relegated to the bench too much, or if Andre Iguodala is offensive inept. He's not really a great perimeter shooter if that's going to cramp their spacing. There's a lot of questions I have there, and also the Andrew Bogut thing.
Right.
So I think they are legitimate contenders, but I'm not ready to put them to the Oklahoma City level.
And what scares me about Golden State Warriors is the fact they're just younger and they can shoot lights out. And if they start knocking down those shots, Spurs are in trouble. And they got
any team is really.
Yeah, and they got two players that can knock down those shots. All right, let's go ahead and now talk about the Clippers. I think the biggest acquisition is Doc Rivers. That is huge.
He's going to instill a defensive identity, that team. This team has lacked that, and even though Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan aren't necessarily good at that part of defense, I mean, they're going to have Doc Rivers there, to teach them how to play.
Right.
And they have Chris Paul, so obviously they have some pieces that are.
Yeah. Once Doc Rivers going to bring that defensive mindset in, and the Clippers and Griffin said Lob City is no more. So, they got CP3, as you mentioned. I just like what Doc Rivers is going to do. Is it going to happen this season? Probably not. But they're going to take time, and they're going to be a legitimate threat. And listen, I got to have more out of Blake Griffin, if you're Clippers, than just dunks. You really do. He's got to develop a low post game. All right, well, those are our thoughts on some threats in the West for the San Antonio Spurs. But head on out to news4sa.com and, of course, ProjectSpurs.com. Leave your thoughts about the threats in the West. And who else do you think out there? Maybe the Mavericks? Who knows? I don't know.
No, not maybe the Mavericks.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's your answer. All right, well, before we put a wrap on this show, preseason is underway. It's about to be ended. 2 more games left against the Magic, I believe, and the Rockets. But they're 2-3 right now. They got blown out 121-96 against Miami Heat in Miami without LeBron James. Any causes, little things you worry about so far, what you've seen?
I wouldn't. I mean, they did turn the ball over 22 times in the loss, and compared to 24 assists, that's a thing that you don't expect them to continue. Nando DeCola has been terrible throughout the preseason. I wouldn't worry too much about that because Patty Mills and Corey Joseph are going to assume a larger role. Other than that, I wouldn't be too worried about the Spurs.
And is it just me, or does Mono look like a man possessed so far?
He does.
That first preseason game, he was diving for the ball, challenging everything, just hustling. I'm like, this is the Mono we know. Who knows? Maybe he's going to try to go out on a high note as opposed to a low note.
That's the plan. People were like grilling his 2-year, $14 million contract, and now maybe he'll live up to it.
Right, and I think you're liking Baines so far?
I have. Aaron Baines has averaged 9 points, 6 rebounds in the preseason. He made the big floater against Atlanta that won the game, and he's just been he's been spry, he's been athletic, and he's a good guy that, could maybe assume some more minutes down the road.
So we should expect you to be wearing your Nando DeCola jersey in the next show?
Oh, I kind of ripped it up.
Why do you do that?
It was hard to do. It was frustrating.
You're just totally a bit of sad face on the entire country of France right now. All right. Well, those are our thoughts again on the preseason. But please do not forget to go out to news4sa.com and, of course, ProjectSpurs.com for everything you need about your San Antonio Spurs. But for Quixem Ramirez, I am Jeff Garcia. Thanks again for watching this episode of the News 4 SA Spurs Roundtable.